Welcome to EPG Parsala. I am Professor Bipin Jojo from School of Social Work, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Today in this lesson we are going to talk about understanding rurality in Indian society as part of the rural development course. As part of this today's lesson, we'll try to discuss about the perspectives of Gandhi, Nehru, Ambedkar's view on village. How do these great leaders who were the founding fathers or the founding pillars of our Indian society or India as a nation, how did they visualize our Indian village? So we'll discuss about their perspectives. And we also will try to understand what is caste and tribe, because in India, caste and tribe, these two categories are very, very important categories when we talk of development. Starting with Gandhi, or these great leaders what we talk of, if we look at their debates and the discussion between these great leaders, one find very, very exciting and very interesting views, which sometimes looks very conflicting views about the Indian village and how they visualized should be Indian village. Some of these debates one can see it as part of Gandhi's view, some of the experiments Gandhi had initiated in different parts of the country, like in Wardha, Sriniketan, and so on and so forth. And also how Nehru visualized as modern India, and as part of the modern India, how Nehru visualized Indian village. At the same time, Ambedkar as the founding father of our Indian Constitution, who belonged to one of the oppressed classes or the caste of this country, how he visualized what should be the Indian village. And along with these three great personalities, I will add one more important personality called Jaipal Singh Munda, who was also very, very important leader from the central tribal India. So we'll look at each one of these great leaders' dream or the vision of Indian village. Starting with Gandhi, sometimes one can see the conflictual views between Gandhi and Nehru. Both of them wanted India to develop. Immediately after independence, India had the major challenge to start the path of development. And Gandhi looked at that how Indian village could be self-reliant, and Indian village could center around the resources and the skill and the needs of the people living in the village. He did not aspire or look for great industrialization like Nehru did. He looked at that everybody's needs should be fulfilled. And as we hear or we see, one of the very, very common saying of Gandhi is that one can fulfill everybody's need, but not everybody's greed. And so there is no end to the economic growth. We can continuously strive for more and more economic growth, which Nehru had tried to do as part of his vision. On the other hand, the Gandhi had vision of saying that how we can be self-reliant, how we can rebuild the village as part of the village reconstruction program. And so he had, with his inspiration and his idea, there were many experiments around the country as part of the rural reconstruction. How Indian village can be self-reliant. Instead of going for the mass industrialization, instead of going for the large investment, how small investment, like cottage industries, khadi industries. As part of the cottage industry, khadi was promoted, like Gandhi's dedication and interest to promote khadi. So how khadi or such kind of cottage industries could be promoted so that large amount of people could get employment in the village itself, and that doesn't require a huge investment, and more people, and the whole production can be consumed by the villagers themselves. You don't have to buy, you don't have to invest, you don't have to think of the marketing. So this is what Gandhi was aspiring, or Gandhi visualized our rural village. On the other hand, if we see Nehru was considered to be the architect of our modern India. He considered that how large investment, large industrialization is necessary to bring about economic growth, to provide employment, to transform this poverty-stricken rural India so that we can create a modern India at par with any other Western country. And so with the Western countries' support and investment, we had large industrialization like steel industries, large dams, roads, ports, green revolution, and so on and so forth. So he visualized that we have to invest and we have to industrialize. And that's why he used to call all these industries, mines, highways, all the symbols of modern India and symbols of modern temple. Okay, and so he was trying to industrialize as fast as possible so that it can create employment, it can provide food, and so it can create or it can generate development in India immediately after independence. On the other hand, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, one who was the chairman of our Indian Constitution Drafting Committee, he thought, or he looked at the village, the rural village is the root of backwardness, root of oppression. It is the root of ignorance and caste conflict. So he had very, very cynical view about the village. Because in the village, because of poor accessibility to infrastructure, education, health, the people remained localized and people remained very, very communalized. They remained very closed. And so he thought that unless the people get out of the village, move towards towns, move toward the cities, it will not be possible for them to get out of that old social traditions, customs of caste, discrimination. It will not be possible for people, especially the people belonging to the socially backward, like scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. He thought that people have to get out of this restricted boundary, restricted world, and explore outside the villages, and so they can be part of the larger Indian process. They can be part of the larger India. So he felt that if the social problem like caste system to be overcome, the people belonging to this lower caste, so-called scheduled caste, if they want to free themselves from this caste system, they should get out of the village and move towards urban centers or cities and be part of the larger cities where nobody knows who belong to what caste. Everybody thinks that what occupation you are in, what are you doing? Where are you working? So he felt that going out of the village and not to protect or as the Gandhi tries to maintain the village. Gandhi tried to promote and see that how the village community can be maintained and the village can be made self-sufficient. In contrast to that, Ambedkar felt move out of this. On the contrary, another great leader called Jaipal Singh Munda, who came from present Jharkhand, who was a great Adivasi or tribal leader from central India, who was part of the Constituent Assembly, in the assembly debating about the constitutional provisions, debating with great leaders in the parliament. His view was opposite to Ambedkar. Jaipal Singh thought that if you want to maintain or if you want to protect, if you want to develop yourself, you have to hold on to your community. If you break your community, you are getting distracted, you are getting marginalized, and so you'll not be able to fight against any kind of exploitative forces. And so he emphasized that better to hold on to the community life, community bonding. And as a community, you can prosper, you can fight, you can face any kind of threats, any kind of struggles, any kind of external forces which try to overcome or try to marginalize them. So one can see that how these great leaders had different dreams or different kind of visualization of Indian village. In this whole of this Indian situation, Indian village, as I said, caste and tribe, these two categories are very, very important categories. And that is why, as part of our Indian constitution also, significant portion of our Indian constitution devotes its provisions for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities. I'll start with scheduled caste or the caste system in India. How do we understand scheduled caste or the caste system in India? Let me say that the word caste originates from Spanish word casta, which means race or a group having hereditary quality. It creates very, very confusing idea, or it creates confusion between Varna and caste or jati. In India, we often refer jati, not caste, in our regular interaction, regular conversation. And we refer Vedic literature where we find Varna. So in one hand Varna, in another other hand Jati. It creates very, very confusing mind. And so if you look at in Vedic literature, there are 4 Varnas, not caste or Jatis. And there are about 4,000 Jatis. Okay, so there is sometimes we get confused between the Varna and Jati. But if you look at, there are 4 Varnas, and within these Varnas there are so many Jatis, and one can think of about 4,000 Jatis in India. Now, if we look at how do we understand caste in India, or how do we understand caste system in India, one has to refer this Varna system. One has to look at this Vedic literature, which provides how the people were created, or how the society was created, or the different people were created. As the scriptures, Hindu scriptures says, Vedic literature says, that the people who were created from the mouth of the god, they were spiritual or religious, And one who is the spiritual performers or the people who are performing spiritual activity or religious activity? The Brahmins. So the people who were created from the mouth of the God were the Brahmins. The people who were created from the arms of the God. Arms means power. And who needs power? Warriors. So the people who were created from the arms of the God were warriors, Kshatriyas. And the third category, who were created from the thighs of the God. Put the people who were kind of the foundation in order to provide food, in order to provide the survival, the people who were involved in business and other economic activities. They were called Vaishyas, who were involved in business activities and other kind of economic activities. And the fourth category, who were created from the foot of the God. They were called Sudras. So one can see the hierarchy of the people who were created from the mouth, the people who were created from the arms, people created from the thighs, and the people created from the foot of the God. The people who were created, they did all kinds of manual jobs, all kinds of lower kinds of jobs. Within that Sudras, there were another category of people who did all kinds of dirty work, all kinds of so-called impure work, like cleaning the toilets or removing the dead animals. They are added as part of the Sudra, they were called Ati Sudra. So within Sudras, there were another category which were called Ati Sudras. So one can see that if you look at the characteristics, the features, there is a hierarchy within our caste system. There are hierarchy, upper caste or lower caste, Brahmins or Kshatriyas, and the lower caste like Sudras or Ati Sudras. So there is a hierarchy, and this hierarchy is also defined based on the occupation. What are the economic activities they do? Like the Brahmins, they do all kind of spiritual and holy things, worshipping, closer to God. In the same way, the Sudras or Ati Sudras, they are doing the most dirty work. And so they were impure because they were doing some of this very, very dirty work, and so they also kept as untouchables because of their activities. And this structure, this caste structure, this Varna system, the children or the people who were born part of these different Varnas, they continue to remain as part of that Varna. And so this became hereditary. So the Brahmin's children became Brahmin, or the Sudra's children became Sudra, and so the Brahmin continued performing the religious work, and the Ati Sudra's children continued doing all this dirty work and so remained untouchables. And that's how within this caste hierarchy, now we can see there is untouchability or discrimination based on this occupation. Now, we can find that there are about 200 million people who belong to this category, which constitute 16.6% of our whole of our Indian population as part of our 2011 census. So it is a huge group of people, 200 million. Okay, so there are a large section who are considered to be Sudra or Ati Sudra. So they continue to be hierarchical. Our caste system, which kept this scheduled caste, or the people who were Sudras or Ati Sudra, which were very, very low. It was hereditary, hierarchical, and also very endogamy. It has got endogamy. It practices endogamy because their marital relationship and all this marriage and all kinds of relationship is within their community. The person who is Brahmin will never marry to Kshatriya or Sudras. So definitely they will marry within their own Brahmin community. Similarly, there is a concept of purity and pollution. The people who carried on the dirty work, they were impure, they polluted. The people who did the very holy work, they were considered to be holy. And so, in this process, they have the distinct occupation of each of this category. And each of this category had their own distinct culture and traditions, celebrations, food pattern, their ceremonies. Each of these categories, each of these varnas had their own traditions and culture. So within this caste structure, within the caste system, each of these varnas, we can see that they are having different tradition and culture. They are defined by their own endogamy. They define by a particular structure or the hierarchy of caste system. Now, when we talk of caste, there is another category called tribe or scheduled tribe. There are about 8.6% of our Indian population who belong to scheduled tribe category. And most of them live in the rural area. About 90% of them, they live in rural area and just about 10% live in urban areas. And so that geographical distribution, if you look at, the central India from east to west, Orissa, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, MP, the central India, east to west, constitute the maximum percentage of the total tribal population in the country. Almost about 70 to 75% population one would find the living in this region. Then we have huge concentration in the northeast. They would consider they would constitute about 20 to 25%, and down south they will be around less than 3% of the people who belong to this category called scheduled tribe. Okay, so when we say that this is a huge population and scattered all over the country, who are these scheduled tribes? How do we define scheduled tribes? As part of our Indian Constitution, the Article 342 says that the President may, with respect to any state or union territory, and where it is a state, after consultation with the governor thereof by public notification, specify the tribes or tribal communities or parts of groups within tribes or the communities which shall, for the purpose of the Constitution, is deemed to be scheduled tribe in relation to that particular state or union territory, as the case may be. What it means that President, in consultation with the governor, can schedule a community or a group of community or a group of a particular community can be scheduled or deemed to be scheduled tribe in relation to that particular state or union territory as scheduled tribe. Now, it becomes very difficult to understand how, on what basis and how the President of India can define or schedule a particular group or a group of communities or subgroups or parts of a group can be defined as scheduled tribe. Though there are administrative and political criteria which provides certain kind of basis, certain kind of criteria, how a particular community or subgroup can be defined as scheduled tribe. One of the criteria says that a particular community should have primitive traits. If a particular group or part of a group or community has primitive traits, that could be one of the criteria to consider. The second criteria is the unique culture. The community must have a unique culture, traditions. And third criteria is geographical isolation, relatively geographical isolation. The community or the people should be isolated from the mainstream society, the larger society. And the fourth criteria is backwardness. Now, if you look at these four criteria, it is based on the administrative processes. It is presented to the parliament, and after the parliament approves, it goes to the President of India, and the President finally approves and gives consent to list this group as scheduled tribe. Though this criteria which has been used, the criteria which was suggested by the Lokur committee immediately after independence, is still followed even today. And so all these criteria can be contested: primitiveness, backwardness, geographical isolation, or cultural uniqueness. All of these criteria could be contested and argued that is it really a community can be considered as geographically isolated, or backward, or primitive, or having a certain kind of shyness. I think all these criteria could be contested. However, the government of India has this criteria to identify a community or part of the community as scheduled tribe. There are few communities who are called PBTGs. Earlier it was known as, or they were known as, primitive tribes. These groups are usually found, or if they are found, pre-agricultural level of technology, or they are stagnant or declining population, or extreme low literacy, subsistence level of economy, then they could be considered as they were known earlier as primitive tribe group, and there are about 75 such groups. So there are some of these criteria which are used by the state bureaucracy to consider a group of people or group of communities as scheduled tribe or erstwhile primitive tribes. Now, what does it mean to us as part of this course when we are talking? How do we look at this kind of categories or this kind of classification and conceptualization of identity as scheduled tribe or people vulnerable tribal group or so-called primitive tribal group? What does it mean to us? Or how do we look at this kind of categorization of certain group as scheduled tribe? It doesn't include their cultural or historical context. It merely uses administrative and the political processes or the criteria to consider or to identify as scheduled tribe. If you look at what are the key characteristics of this community. Now the tribes generally will have their totemic name, the clan group. They will have a shared history. Where did they begin and how did they move from one place to another place. And so each of this community will have their own common shared history. And each of them will have their own culture or language or rituals, celebrations, etc. Generally, they are associated with a particular geographical territory, and they have a very strong sense of community solidarity. Most of the time, as they are found in the forest, hills, or the mountain area, all the celebrations, all the rituals, all their totemic name are associated with the nature. Forest, birds, or animals, or different kind of natural artifacts. And so there is a strong bondage or strong relationship, what in other words it is called as symbiotic relationship between the tribes and the nature. So they depend on nature, they worship nature, they celebrate nature, and so in return nature also depends on them for their protection, for their survival, for their nurturing. So there is a strong bondage between this nature and the tribes. And today if you find, there are large tribes called Gonds or Bhils or Santals who are into millions. On the other hand, we have tribes like Onges, Nicobares, who are in few numbers, just 20, 25, 30. They are almost about to extinguish. So in one hand there are large groups, on the other hand there is just few numbers. They all can be found having different, very specific linguistic group or racial group. They all belong to either Australoid or Mongoloid or Dravidian racial stock or linguistic group. And so they are having very endogamic family relationship or marital relationship within their own community, within their own tribal group, within their community group, all their marital relationship or their other kind of interaction taking place. At the same time, each of this tribal group will have their own council of governance. They will have their own panchayat, caste panchayat or community panchayat, which govern their socio-cultural system of practices within the community. And so they have got their own traditional way of governing their own systems, their own system of traditional governance they have. So some of these characteristics one can find when we talk of tribes or Adivasis or scheduled tribes. One also can find they're into different kind of economic activities, starting with settled agriculture to shifting cultivation. They're also dependent on minor forest producers. They're also dependent on animal husbandry and many other kind of non-agricultural activities. They never believed on individual ownership of resources, always believed on a family or the community. And so the resources were owned by the community, not by the individuals. Individuals could be tilling a particular land, but that tiller cannot sell that land. For example, if you go to Meghalaya, you cannot buy land or sell land without the consent of the village elders. If you want to buy land or sell a land, you have to consult the village elders. They will decide, they will give permission, then only you can sell it. And so they feel that the land should not go away from the community, it should remain within the community. So there is no concept of individual ownership or the private ownership, which has come of late, which has introduced recently. This private ownership of the resources has been introduced as part of the modern state, as part of the modernization, which has come in now. And so private ownership or individual ownership of the resources one can find. Then one also finds they are settled. They are also nomads. There are many communities who are nomads, who are moving from place to place. Say animal rearers or banjaras In many places one finds, either in Rajasthan or Andhra Pradesh. Similarly, many other communities who herd cattle, they move from place to place. Or sometimes their whole life itself, or their tradition of their lifestyle is nomadic life. So we have settled people who depend on settled agriculturists or the shifting cultivation. On the other hand, we also have people, other tribes who go on moving from place to place, who are called nomads. We also find many of the tribes, especially in Maharashtra, Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, who are considered to be denotified tribes. The denotified tribes who were considered to be the criminal tribes by the Britishers, by the act of law. They were denotified in 1952 by the Government of India, independent Government of India, denotified from the criminal tribes, and so they are still called as denotified tribes even today. And so they were considered that they were by birth, they were criminals. So every child was born as criminals. And with this act of 1952, after independence, they were denotified and they have been classified as denotified tribe. Especially they are found in Maharashtra, Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. So we can see some of these kind of features and characteristics of scheduled tribes or tribes what generally refer, and sometimes they are also referred as Adivasis in central India. In addition to that, one would see that what are the challenges, what are the difficulties, what are the dynamics one can find in the present time. Though we have independent India, which has provided number of provisions, constitutional provisions, for their protection from different kind of exploitative measures, also provides different provisions for their development. Despite all this, these two communities, scheduled caste or scheduled tribes, altogether they constitute almost like 22 to 23% of our Indian population. They are vulnerable for their historical region, their cultural region, and so they are marginalized. And so it is very important for us as part of this course to discuss and understand what is caste and how certain groups of people have remained as part of the caste system as untouchables. Similarly, how certain groups of the certain communities have remained as backward, marginalized based on their ethnicity. And so it is looked at how such kind of groups to be assimilated or integrated with the mainstream society. How the larger society looks at them to bring about the mainstream, or how they can be brought as part of the larger Indian society. So what we have done it in this lesson, we have tried to look at the different perspectives of our great leaders. I mentioned about these four leaders: father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, then modern architect of India, Nehru, and the chairman of our Indian Constitution Drafting Committee, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and the great tribal leader, Jaipal Singh Munda. How they looked at differently about Indian village in their respective views. In addition to that, we also try to understand two social categories called scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, or the caste and the tribe. How these two categories have been historically and culturally very, very important categories in our Indian society, and who happen to be mostly living in the rural India. And so it becomes very important for us to know and understand who are these people and how are they determined to be part of this category called caste and tribe. In our next lesson, we'll try to see how different institutions we have in our Indian villages and how these institutions provide different social structure and economic structure. Then again, these marginalized communities or the vulnerable communities are most likely to be vulnerable or most likely to be impoverished because of their historical and cultural past. Thank you.